What is up, everybody? Welcome to our final episode of this season. It's been a long one. It's been a really long one. Obviously, if you've been following LAFC, supporting them, I mean, w- three competitions that they had an opportunity, won a trophy. I mean, there's plenty more competitions, but three really big ones that they were in the final. Obviously, unfortunately, they came short. But it was, to me, just to kind of reflect on the season. It was a memorable season. It was a historic season. Obviously, with LAFC not coming up with the trophy and just missing out, it's gonna be tough, and we're gonna talk about that. But Justin and I, we went to Columbus, and it was an incredible experience. Justin, how you doing?
Doing well, man. Yeah, finally back from Columbus. It was a fun trip, a very interesting trip. Lower.com Field is a beautiful stadium and was a beautiful venue to host MLS Cup. I think that Columbus as a whole did a fantastic job of hosting MLS Cup as well. The fans were very welcoming, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was a very good event, even though not the result that LAFC wanted.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Columbus because it was amazing. The town obviously is a college town. If you guys don't know, Ohio State is a university that's there. Um, but to me, I got there Friday. I think you got there Thursday. Got there Friday uh, around like 4 in the afternoon. After that, got an Uber straight to the stadium. Well, actually, I couldn't get an Uber because my they kept canceling. And then another LAFC fan that was on my flight offered for me to hop on, then I could get an Uber from there because it was crazy. I had like four Ubers back to back just cancel on me. So he let me. He asked if I wanted to hop on with him. The Airbnb where I was staying, that was not too far from him, so I was like, sure, why not? I ended up going to the stadium. I picked up my credential, went there, saw kind of, saw how nice lower.com field is. It's really cool experience. Yeah, and then like obviously Friday night, I saw we went with the supporters, or at least I did. We went to go see. They had like a little pregame thing or did night before, and Will Ferrell ended up showing up and getting the party started and going, getting the supporters kind of just riling up before the day before the game. But I thought that was really cool. I think that's one of the things that's very unique about LAFC, right? Outside of the great experiences, the fan base, but also like the celebrities are involved, like Jaime Camille. He was there at the pregame march. Obviously, Will Ferrell, Nomar Garcia Parra. So it's like countless. It was just a unique experience to see that and see how, regardless of who people are, they love this club and they love this culture. Talk to me a little bit about your experience because I you did more of the media stuff on Thursday. Kind of walk me through what you guys did, what you did, because I know you were also with Fabian and a couple other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I got in Thursday morning, afternoon, headed straight to Lower.com Field where they were doing, yeah, those media press conferences before the game. I actually missed LAFC. My flight landed right as LAFC started. So I hopped on Zoom right as my flight landed and then kept on Zoom on my Uber to Lower.com Field. You know, with those press conferences for LAFC. And then once I got to Lower.com Field, it was time for the Columbus Crew press conferences. Talked with Darlington Nagbe, Cucho Hernandez, etc. And then, yeah, it was an interesting one. The next day, got some more media coverage, of course, from the players, and the coaches spoke. Don Garber spoke as well in his State of the League address. So, yeah, just a lot of media events packed back to back in those Thursday and Friday, because as you would expect, MLS Cup, there is a lot of national media around and they want to get as much coverage as they can, as much content as they can. And I think MLS did a pretty good job in that respect. Don Garber's speech, I know, brought a lot of talking points, whether it be no fourth DP, stopping at 30 teams, the US Open Cup, the Leagues Cup, whatever they're looking at. A lot to be said and a vote to happen soon as well on maybe some potential rule changes and things like that. So uh, lots happening not only with LAFC, but with MLS as a whole in that MLS Cup weekend.
Yeah, no, this is obviously my second time. I believe your second time covering the MLS Cup final. They're very unique because as soon as it happens, right, the following week, so everything just kind of is just quick for everything. Like this is bam, this is happening, Don Garber's happening, like all these different things, and this is the last you'll probably hear from obviously players, coaches, and obviously Don Garber, who's the commissioner. And it's a lot of information, a lot to kind of take in just in like what 3 days, and it's just a lot a lot going on. They address certain things. Also, I think one of the big things too was the things that came out after the pod last week. LAFC got fined 100,000, or LA, because of the 3252 with the flares and everything. And I think that was also, like, I believe it was asked to Don Garber, right? And I think just certain things like that, like, I kind of want to talk about it a little bit, because it's like, I know everybody's kind of already made the point, but I think MLS just doesn't understand. Because look, overall, like, MLS look bad in this, right? Look bad in wanting to fine for what the supporters are doing, and what, like, the expectations was of where the 3252 have taken MLS, and where I saw a lot of people on Twitter like, hey, I've never been to an MLS game, but I'd like to go to an LAFC game because of just the atmosphere, and that's what sells people. That just shows that the average fan, or the people that don't watch MLS, that's what's going to get them hooked in those things. And I feel like when the league does certain things, it's like they're taking like 3 steps back instead of taking a couple steps forward. Yeah, I understand it's like safety and all these other things that are concerned, but it just, to me, it makes no sense because of what the supporters groups have done. The impact has had just on the news and social media is just like, when you see what they do, it's very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that, yeah, there's a lot of aspects to this. So many different pieces, I think, that play into this. Whether from the league's perspective, the fans' perspective, or the club's perspective, I think each of them have their own, and they're all valid, right? Yes, the league has its own perspective of maintaining safety, maintaining the fire marshal's laws, and all of these type of things, right? Because that is important. Yeah, nobody asked Don Garber about that at the State of the League address, so I'm not sure exactly what his personal opinions are on it. But you understand that the league does have these very clear rules. It is very clear within the MLS rulebook that flares are not allowed, and so fines have to come down, suspensions have to come down. Now, I think when you're looking at the level of these suspensions, or the degree to which LAFC has been punished, the questions can be raised, right? I think for the most part, the reason that it was such a heavy suspension, and we're still going to have to wait and see exactly what comes down in 2024, right? Because that is pending investigation. So the punishment is still yet to be finally determined. But with that said, I think that the reaction that you saw from opposing fan bases, whether it be on Twitter or other social medias, heavily impacted the decision that MLS made, because there was a lot of talk of, well, LAFC don't get punished when they do things like this. There's a double standard for LAFC. And the league had to prove, well, hey, there is no double standard for any team in this league, even if the league often uses LAFC's supporters and the 3252 as marketing tools, because, as you say, when people see that, they are intrigued to come to a game. And I think that that is where we need to focus and say, yes, how do we build this league? How do we attract new fans? And yes, we understand that safety is of importance, but that isn't at the detriment of denying supporter culture in this country. And I think that that is the key, right? Because we know these things would not be allowed in the NBA, the NFL, etc. And that is what MLS does. They continue to model themselves after other American sports and compete with those leagues. But we are starting to see the invasion of South American and European football culture. Don Garber wasn't asked about the flares, but I did ask Steve Cherundolo about the flares. And while he didn't want to comment on the punishment specifically, he did say that the first time he was at BMO Stadium, it reminded him of Germany. It reminded him of Europe. And that is a big statement coming from a man who played his entire career in Germany and was a captain of one of the most historic clubs there. So it is a telling, I think, of how you need to grow this league. I agree with what you're saying, that you have to allow these type of things. You have to put in place precautions or whatever rules that need to be in place to allow it. But fining teams and suspensions are not really the solution, I think, because sure, LAFC, they don't care about the $100,000 fine, whatever. But if you're planning to suspend the 32-52, you're damaging not only the supporter culture in this league, but the team as well. I think that it is, detrimental in the long term to try and prevent the invasion of real football supporter culture into America, because I think that is only going to grow the game. And I hope that MLS finds ways to work around these safety issues, which again do exist, but they need to be addressed in a proper way so that fans can still enjoy themselves to the final degree that they want to.
Yeah, and just to kind of finish off with that, I think some of these rules are meant to be broken, meant to be adjusted, and I think this is definitely one of them because they've shown that look they can do it. Obviously, no one was hurt. Everybody was having fun, and the impact just makes it that much more cooler, that much more better. Because no other league in the U.S. can do what the supporters can do here, and that's what makes it. That's what makes it like wow. That just looks crazy, right? That looks like dang. I want to experience that because it looks so unique, so insane that we can have that in MLS. And MLS can definitely, in my opinion, can definitely do this and find some type of way to make it safety. You have certain things, because you want to, and it's different once you're sitting in a supporter section than just sitting in a regular seat, right? That it's gonna be you're gonna be chanting, there's gonna be a lot more. So if yours your first time going to an MLS game, you're obviously not gonna sit in the supporter section, or you should at least know that like, hey, you're gonna get some beer spilled on you, and it's gonna be a lot more rowdy than what you expect, right? And I think there's certain things like that someone that either is taking a fan or something like that should obviously know coming into something like that. But look, let's move on. I want to talk a little bit more about Columbus, man. I just feel like that the day of the game. I think you and we ended up meeting. It was like the same bar that the fans had the night before, where Will Ferrell was. I believe it was called Gasworks or something, in Columbus. It was a really cool bar, really big bar. So the supporters walked about, I want to say 20 minutes, like a 20-minute walk from the bar from downtown Columbus all the way to Lower.com Field, and that was cool. You and I were obviously in Leon, Guanajuato. We saw that, but they walked through a different, like a back way. They didn't want. It was not as I would say as safe in Leon as it was in Columbus, because Leon, man, people were like Leon fans were ready to fight LAFC fans. But walking through the streets of Columbus, and the supporters going through that, and waking up the people that were like either apartments there or like local businesses. Everybody was recording the 32-52, and regardless of what the game, like the 32-52 minutes presence felt. They got a police escort and bikes coming through. So just being able to walk to the stadium, that was a very, very cool experience. That's one of the best, I would say, one of the best experience outside the game that I've had from this season. Just to see that, and obviously be able to record that, and all those different interactions, see fans come together. Some people flew in that morning just to get to the game, right? And then the people were like, hey, I flew in yesterday, and hearing everybody about like them coming together. And obviously, and then there was that point where like Columbus Crew supporters and LAFC supporters crossed paths, and they were like, just talking smack to each other respectfully, which was really cool. And just seeing that in MLS, and just seeing how both fan bases, obviously the Crew been here for like since the beginning, and obviously LAFC, what they've been able to build. Give me your thoughts on that, because to me that was really cool.
Yeah, it's an incredible march. I think again, it's just showing the supporter culture that LAFC has brought into this league. I mean, there was a sea of black and gold headed to Lower.com Field for, as you say, it's a 20-minute walk. Maybe if you don't stop, but they were stopping at every block, made it probably 45 minutes of a walk to Lower.com Field, because it was, as you say, police escort, all these things. And I think it's also great that they're able to walk through the streets of Columbus, as you say, safe and sound, and they can have these, little run-ins with Columbus fans who are tailgating on the side of the road and things like that. But it was respectful for the most part, as you say. So it was great to see the passion, but with a cap on it, right? There's a level to where you bring it, and I think that is fantastic to see from both sides. And the traveling support, as you say, I'm not sure any team can travel with the numbers that LAFC traveled with to Columbus. they filled up those sections at the top of lower.com field 203 to 209, if I remember correctly, right across from the Nordecki, and were loud and proud the whole game. So it was a fantastic atmosphere. And yeah, I think it was probably the best march in LAFC history, because the MLS Cup march from last year, you remember, yeah, was great and packed, of course, because it was in LA, but they just walked through Expo Park. It's much shorter, it's much more condensed, and it was fantastic. It was loud. But this one, just the length of it makes it a little bit more fun, a little bit more intense, I think. And then you run into Columbus fans on the way. So yeah, it was a very exciting moment, and a historic one for LAFC to travel with that many numbers, hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah, well, the one thing I didn't get to post it, but it was this one Columbus Crew supporter. Uh, he was coming out of his apartment and just giving the bird to LAFC fans, just like dude just stood on business, man. And like it was like you could tell he was just woken up, obviously, because like LAFC fans would have the drum and everything. He just stood there for like as long as the 3252 were walking by, he just gave everybody the bird. He's like, yeah, whatever. Like, he just like, and it was just like the funniest thing that I can remember about the march there. But no, that was pretty cool. Like, how many? I think you tweeted that like what, like 700 to 800 supporters.
Yeah, they
Came
they
were
they
expected
said
were.
something like that, was the official number, based on LAFC tickets sold, and then a lot on resale, things like this. So yeah, I would say somewhere around probably 1.5 thousand uh, LAFC fans in that stadium, or somewhere around there, maybe more, maybe less.
Yeah, yeah, no, the support was definitely big. Yeah, I mean, obviously, once getting there to the stadium, man, the energy in the stadium once obviously the pregame festivities was cool. Obviously, they put on the show, the fireworks and all that, and then just the game. Obviously, the crew supporters. We sat. We were towards the crew supporters on the left side. That's where our outdoor little press box was at. Um, Once the energy started, once the crew supporters were going, obviously we could hear the 3252 on the right side. Obviously being outside a BMO stadium, the energy there for an MLS game was just unreal. It just for me, I was just like, once the game started and everything, I was like, you felt the energy, and I was like, I was pumped. It was just insane. Like that to me, uh, that final, the way it started, the way the energy and everything, it was really cool. Like I don't know what you thought about that, but to me, it was just like, wow, this Columbus really brought it.
Yeah, no, they absolutely did. I think it was an absolutely incredible atmosphere. Obviously, you expect that in MLS Cup a little bit, but I know this was our second, but I know people who have been to 10, 20 MLS Cups, and they were tweeting that this could be, one of the best atmospheres they had ever seen, because it was that rocking from minute one. Both from both supporter sections, right? The Nordecki and the traveling 3252 on the other end. And I think it was helpful as well and cool that they were directly opposite each other, right behind each goal, so they were kind of chanting at each other, and everybody else was in the middle on the sidelines, and they're kind of getting it from either side. So the atmosphere is just booming sound, booming voices, and wonderful chants from each supporter section. So yeah, it made for a really, really fun atmosphere, and once again reminded me a little bit of Europe.
Yeah, no, it's growing. I mean, and the shout out to like their stadium. We took a lap around the stadium. It was cool. Like obviously, everything was covered. It's like the walking areas of the stadium are covered. Obviously, there's not like a roof that covers everything, but like anywhere you would walk around the stadium, you will cover you. It was covered, so you wouldn't, unless you were sitting in certain sections, you would get rained on. But I really like the layout, and I was surprised that only 20,802 people were there. It felt like a lot more people were in the stadium. But yeah, that stadium looks massive. It looks a lot bigger than what it is in person, and it felt like there was more than 20,800 people at the stadium, and it was a really, like, just being there my first time, being able to walk around it. It was a dope stadium.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the biggest, but yeah, it does feel a little bit bigger than that. I agree. They set an attendance record at MLS Cup, unsurprisingly, with over 20,000 people. But Yeah, I think that it's the second newest stadium in MLS, if I'm not mistaken, of course, behind St. Louis. Um, and you can see that, right? I think that new MLS stadiums have done a great job of taking inspiration from European stadiums. I think particularly with Lower.com, it was a German influence, I think, or at least that I could feel. And you mentioned that giant roof that is just basically a square roof coming in, covering everything but the field, covering the concourses, covering the stands, covering everything. And I think yeah, that's great. The way that it's structured in just four sides built down into a field, it's basic. It kind of looks that way, but it is also the perfect way to build a stadium. And you throw that supporter section on one end, it makes for a great atmosphere and a great stadium. And I hope that more MLS teams, as they continue to develop new stadiums, move into soccer-specific stadiums, for example, New York City and things like that, it will see more of this European influence and more of these fantastic stadiums throughout the league, because the more that we have that, the better atmosphere. All of these things contribute to growing the league, of course.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's talk a little bit about the game. Because obviously we know the result. I don't know how much we need to talk about it. I think the biggest thing to me, the surprising thing to me about this game was how I kept saying this, like how slow, or they didn't bring the energy, or maybe they did, but Columbus Crew just brought it that much more, because it was just all LA. I even saw the highlights this morning just to see, excuse me, just to see the highlights again. In that first half, it was all Columbus Crew, and I was just so shocked because out of all three finals that LAFC had played, look, no final is easy, but this to me would be the easiest, if that's okay to say, because of who they played. They played Leon, obviously Tigres, and they've also been battle tested. And on top of that, they were flying high in the playoffs, right? They went on this incredible run in the playoffs, obviously to make it to the final. So I was very shocked to see that whether it was a Columbus Crew that made it that difficult on them, or LAFC just wasn't awake for this final. And I don't know how you can't be prepared, or can't be awake, or can't, have that intensity in the final, or I was very shocked. And I think a lot of people very, very, very disappointed in that first half, because they only had like one clear opportunity, and that was in the 45th minute for them to score, or have an opportunity to score. Talk to me about for the start of the game and what you thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, you nailed it. It was a lack of energy from LAFC, I think, and I'm not sure why they had that lack of energy. I think, yeah, you mentioned a similar thing in Leon a little bit. But we asked Denny Bouanga why that was. He didn't have an answer either. It was just one of those things where they thought they would come out with the energy. They thought they could match Columbus Crew, and they just didn't. Whether it was the moment or whatever it was, it took LAFC back, and they were dominated for minute one. As you say, we knew Columbus were going to dominate possession, but it was the lack of defensive structure, the lack of shifting, the lack of ability to release in transition, the things that LAFC's game model is built around if they're going to play a defensive structure were not there. And so it's not just about possession. Possession is one thing, but it's about the way that the game is played. And I think you saw that particularly on the second goal, when LAFC was just slow to shift right. Columbus, I think, did a fantastic job throughout the game of spreading the pitch, touchline to touchline. They continually, if the ball was on one side of the field, often you'll see teams compress the pitch. The winger or the wide back on the other side will come a little bit inside, but not Columbus Crew. They stayed on the touchline, heels on the touchline, stretching the field as wide as they could. Now that makes it more difficult for LAFC, who want to play a compact 4-3-3, and for LAFC, for that four back rather than five back, more narrow, Hollingshead has to come inside or he has to stay outside. The same thing with the midfielders. In this case would be Tillman or Acosta would have to move right and left really well. And so what LAFC tried to do was just compress Crew into one side of the pitch. That means if they're on the right side of the pitch, they don't get to switch it to the left. If they're on the left, they don't get to switch it to the right. The problem is they continue to switch it, and LAFC could not stop that ball from going back and forth between the sides. And that is how crew scored that second goal, right? It was a fantastic team goal. I believe 9 out of the 10 outfield players touched the ball in the move, and they moved it from the right side, pulled LAFC all the way to the right. Acosta, Ilie, Tillman all moved over, and then they quickly switched it over to their left center back, Amundsen, who Tillman was late to rotate into the midfield. Bouanga had to then go and press the center back. He was slow to do so. Amundsen split both of those players, which then split Jesus Murillo and Ryan Hollingshead, who was too far over to the right, trying to, again, stay with Yao Yaboa on the right side, who was, again, on the touchline, keeping things wide, and that created a gap between Jesus Murillo and Ryan Hollingshead for Amundsen to play that line-splitting pass through. Yaboa was in behind, fantastic finish with the outside of his boot. So, yes, Ryan Hollingshead had a poor game, he had a poor night, but it was more of a slow, just lethargic performance from LAFC, I think, especially obviously in that first half. In the second half, things changed a little bit. Momentum started to build for LAFC, which crew, again, did a fantastic job of slowing things down, making it more difficult, whether it was Schulte staying on the ground for 5 minutes or slow to take free kicks, slow to take whatever, slowing the game down. They knew what it meant and what it took to win that game, and they employed exactly what they needed to do. And I think all credit goes not only to them, but to Wilfred Nancy for the way that he has built this team over just 1 year in charge.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot to take in there, but I think also too, like the other point too was like the midfield play in this game, especially in that first half, was just not non-existent, and I think that was like the biggest thing. I mean, obviously we know Hollingshead had a tough night, with Jabo on the right side. It was, I mean, both goals were created or happened from that right side. Obviously, I know that speed definitely killed the Hollingshead. Jabo was just impressive what he was doing, and obviously with Palacios or Hollingshead, the right side. Hollingshead just doesn't have that pace. And I think we saw, I think Palencia ended up coming in for him in the second half. But I just felt like there's just certain things when the midfield play is not happening right. You're not going to make a sub in the first half. That just doesn't happen. But I just feel like certain things when we saw Bogus come in, right, he instantly made an impact in that midfield and certain things. But I just felt all season long, LAFC, the way this roster was built, they just didn't have a player that could impact the game in the second half, where they needed a player, right? If you want to go back to last year, you can name a couple different players that were like, hey, they could get you a goal. And obviously this season, I think in some of these tight games, whether it was Leon or Tigres, or especially this final, you didn't have a player that you count on. They were like, this guy could give me a goal. Like the Columbus Crew, they have Christian Ramirez, who throughout the players was able to give him a goal off the bench. When I looked at the LAFC roster, when I looked at the LAFC team this year, there's not one player that I could count that you can look at and be like, okay, this guy could give me a goal. It's supposed to be Mario, but Mario has not looked good. Did not look good this year with LAFC. Potential Nathan Ordaz, but I don't think that's Nathan Ordaz's responsibility just yet. If you sign like a player like Mario, that has to be him. And if it's not Mario, then you look at the bench list and it's very, very thin. And I think that was one of the things that LAFC struggled all year long. Is like, yes, if LAFC can beat you, if LAFC is able to beat you in those 90 minutes, then obviously they're going to win. But if they need someone to come off the bench, if it's not Danny Bouanga, if not Carlos Vela, who hadn't scored for the team, or if it wasn't Ryan Hollingshead, right? If everyone, Carlos Vela scored this last in the playoffs. But if it wasn't Ryan Hollingshead or someone like that gave him, if it wasn't one of the starters, it was very difficult for LAFC bench to have an impact or score for them. And I think that was their biggest Achilles heel this season.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think you saw kind of when players arrived, they kind of showed that ability for a split second, and then it kind of faded off. You think of Timothy Tillman, scored a couple goals early on. Fufu Krastev scored in his debut, right? And you thought maybe these guys can be providing things off the bench, providing a little bit of creativity and goal scoring from midfield. But it just never came. Mario, absolutely, it was meant to be that guy, but has not hit yet. And we'll see what happens with him in this offseason in 2024. But it's leading into just the way that LAFC have played this season, and a stark contrast to the way that they played in the first 5 seasons of LAFC, right? Not only are we talking about the game model of wanting to defend more, play in transition more, have the ball less, these type of things that Cherundolo has implemented, but more importantly, I'm talking about the way that LAFC has been the best second half team in the league without question over the past 6 years. Even they were so good in the first 5 years that even now, after a year in which they weren't good in the second half, they're still the best team in the league if you look at it over the 6-year period, right? They have the most shots on goal, the most goals, the most chances created in the second half of any team in the league over the past 6 years. So that is their MO. That has been their MO. But this season, it wasn't, right? They came back and beat teams, I think, twice in MLS play this year when they conceded the first goal. But on the other hand, when they scored the first goal, as we know, they were fantastic. So it was an issue where the starters kind of won games for LAFC in the first half or in the second half occasionally, but generally it was those starters, right? It was scoring that first goal that won the game. And for a team that if you're not going to come back well, you're probably not going to have very successful second halves. And it all relates to each other because, as you say, they didn't really have a guy to come and say, well, we're losing. We need a goal. I'm going to go give it to you. We're tied. We need 3 points. I'm going to go get them. Didn't really happen for LAFC this year.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing, and obviously next year may be different for them. They may get a guy or Mario picks it up, but I think that was the biggest thing, and that was the biggest concern. Since the start of Leon, that there wasn't a guy that could change the game for them, and obviously that happens. But yeah, let's talk about a little bit about Giorgio Chiellini just announced his retirement. Obviously, we saw that photo of him and Carlos Vela. That photo of Carlos Vela and him very emotional. It's been a pleasure to see Giorgio Chiellini come to LA, come play for LAFC. I mean, the interactions I've had with him were always great. He always shook your hand, very respectful. As a legend, like you never know, like right. Sometimes when you meet some of these legends, you never know. All you know is like this dude is a tough center back, one of the best center backs in the world, and he's just so nice and charismatic that it kind of throws you off. Like how is this guy so that much stuff, but at the same time like that nice? And it's just like because I remember he came up to the first, I think, press conference we all had with him last year. Like he literally shook everybody's hand. And I was like, yo, Giorgio just came up to me and shook my hand. It was weird. Like, cause we don't really see that many players do that. Like you don't players around the league that just come up to you and shake your hand and want to get to like, know you at least or acknowledge you in a personal way like that. And for him to be a legend and to do that's one of the things that I remember from him. And he was always like that, whether we saw him in the locker room or any interaction. He was always Giorgio, really nice dude that would shake your hand and say, what's up, and obviously now he retires. It's unfortunate that LAFC wasn't able to win back-to-back trophies, but look, his career has been stapled. He's going to go down, if not one of the best center backs, the best center backs in the world has ever seen. And it was honestly a pleasure to watch him play for LAFC.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. I think we both feel privileged to have been able to cover such an incredible player at LAFC. I think it's a great point that you bring up that, some players, some coaches don't care about media or even have an animosity towards media, but Giorgio Chiellini was never that way. He was always respectful, always helpful. And I think it wasn't just media, right? That's just how he lived his life. That is who he was to everybody that he interacted with. Anybody who he came in contact with, he treated them the same way. It was never, oh, I'm Giorgio Chiellini, I'm better than you. No, never, ever. He's not Zlatan. He's the complete opposite of Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And I think that is what leads him to the success that he's had, right? He doesn't come into the league and think like Xherdan Shaqiri would, oh, these guys aren't good, I'm going to dominate them, I don't need to try. No. He thinks it's just as good as of a league as I've ever played in. These players are still professional footballers, and I have to go and study them and figure out how to beat them, which is why Giorgio Chiellini was as knowledgeable about the other teams in MLS as any other player in the league. And that is why he's so successful. He puts in the work. He is going to study. He's going to talk to people. He's going to do whatever it takes to get the information that he needs in order to succeed. And that's why I'm sure whatever his next step is, which I believe will be some kind of front office business side of of football, probably at Juve, hopefully at LAFC for a little bit so he can stick around. But he has a master's in business administration. He is a really, really intelligent guy, and I think his work ethic is going to continue to have him succeed wherever he goes. It is sad to know that this is the last day, or MLS Cup was his last game, but at least we were there to witness it, right?
Yeah, we were there. Obviously, we got to talk to him, and it was it was really cool. So shout out to you, Giorgio. Man, an amazing player and even better person.
Ciao,
Obviously,
Giorgio.
yeah, and obviously there's a couple more players that I think are out of contract. Look, I'm not going to name them all. I think Maxime Crepeau. I think obviously we know Palacios, we know Carlos Vela. The list goes on, right? And I think the biggest one, that the next one that's going to move on for sure, is Palacios. Palacios has had a successful career with LAFC. I think he's going to move on to his next chapter, whether it's Europe or where maybe it's South America, wherever it is. He's that, to me. He's done because he's ready for that next move. Though there's going to be a lot of turnover potentially for LAFC, depending on the roster spots. But yeah, I think look, you'll be able to get. You're going to have to find a solid left back like you did in Palacios, and I'm sure they'll be able to have a couple players. But give me your overall thoughts on Palacios and his career with LAFC.
Yeah, Palacios has been one of the best, if not the best, fullback in the league for a couple of years now. He has developed fantastically well. I think at LAFC he is a lockdown defender at this point and can go and contribute on the offensive end as well, even though didn't do so much of that this season. But he is he's as good as it gets in this league. And yeah, Steve Cherundolo called him the best fullback in the league, I think a month or two ago, right? So I would assume LAFC want to try and keep him, but as you say, that's not going to be an easy task with interest from Europe, interest from South America, and he becomes a free agent. So yeah, I would expect him to move on probably, and that means that LAFC needs to find a replacement. I think that the most obvious replacement, although comes with a little bit of controversy, is Kai Wagner, who is also becoming a free agent and looks ready to leave Philadelphia, but seems a little bit more open to another MLS team than maybe Diego Palacios is. You look at, as you say, Maxime Crepeau, players like this need to be re-signed. John McCarthy also out of contract. So what happens with him is going to be interesting because he probably wants to be a starter somewhere and probably deserves to be, but that won't be at LAFC if Maxime Crepeau is re-signed. You have a couple, intense, really important midfielders in Ilie Sanchez and Kellen Acosta out of contract, right? Ilie Sanchez, I believe, is going to come back, as far as I'm aware, has a clause in his contract to have an extension. So I'm surprised that those exercised options have not been announced yet by LAFC. They were due on December 10th and have been turned into the league, just not publicly announced yet. Should be soon. And so he'll fall into that category. Kellen Acosta will be a very interesting one to find out because LAFC spent significant money on him a couple of years ago, right? And so letting him go for free is not really a simple thing. But at the same time, there's been rumors of LAFC's interest in Danny Pereira, for example, Austin FC's central midfielder, who I have heard from both sides that interest is legitimate. We'll see if that comes to fruition. There are other teams interested as well. So yeah, a lot of moving pieces, as you say. I think there will be significant turnover with LAFC this offseason, similar to what we saw maybe 2 years ago, maybe not quite to that same extent, but we'll see. And yeah, it's going to be an eventful one. So definitely keep your eyes open. Don't just tune out until next season because things will be happening.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes. Let's talk about Steve Cherundolo. I know he had mentioned when you asked him a question, it's kind of I forgot the question. We ended up posting it. But about this season, he said, well, I'll let you talk about it. But essentially, he said this season was a success. Obviously, the team LAFC went trophyless. They were in 3 finals. They didn't win a single one. At the start of the year, we all knew that they like CCL was a real possibility, and for them, we obviously knew about Campeones Cup that was going to happen regardless. So, and we expected them to make it to the MLS Cup final. or at least be close, right? Um, so at the start of the year, if I was like, all right, they had like 5 competitions, like even Leagues Cup and Open Cup. So they had 5 trophies that they could have played for, right?
7, but
Um,
yeah.
oh, 7? Okay, well, my bad.
If you add in, yeah, the Campeones Cup and then Western Conference Final trophy.
No, I'm not in the Western Conference Final trophy. I'm not doing that. But yeah, so like you add in those, right? And I was thinking, all right, let's just do these 3 that we obviously we didn't know, but we didn't know. Out of these three trophies, I was like, okay, if they win 2 out of 3, great. 3 out of 3, you become part of the greatest club in MLS history, right? Winning these 3 trophies in a year, probably you go down as probably one of the best, if not the best team in MLS Cup trophy. 2 out of 3, you're still pretty solid. 1 out of 3, hey, at least you got one. At least you got one in, and you got one in. And outside of winning Campeones Cup, right, like which was I probably put the lower of the trophies out of the 3. But if you won CCL or you won MLS Cup, your CCL, you're guaranteed to go to the Club World Cup, which I thought was obviously important. They missed out on that, and now you go 0 for 3. Then you're like, at least remember, my damn, they weren't able to get one trophy with Danny Boanga, tying Carlos Vela in 38 goals all time in all competitions. With the performances that Maxime Crepeau had this year, with the performances that you had from some of the bench players, then you start to think about like, okay, what went wrong and how can you define the season? I know Sharonda will define it as a success, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, I think, and one, I brought up in my article after the game on Substack. Those of you who want to go read it, but I think that it's tough because you look at it and you say, yes, LAFC were the first team to lose 3 finals in a season, right? But they were also the first team to appear in 3 finals in a single season. So yes, it's disappointing for them to lose those finals, but does that make it a failure? I think is a different question, because getting to those points is certainly a success, right? And I think when you frame it the way that you did is interesting and important, because what did you expect at the beginning of the season? What were those expectations? And I think certainly those expectations were at least one trophy, and that did not happen unless, as you say, you count that Western Conference trophy, which is certainly not a major trophy, right? Which I think you could count 5, if not 6, of all the other ones major trophies. So it is an interesting dilemma or debate between, is it a success to reach a final or is it a failure to lose one? And I think it's both. I think it's a disappointment for LAFC to lose those finals. I think it's a disappointing season, but I think it's also a successful season in that they did a lot. They competed through 53 games, an MLS record, through grueling injuries and travel. They traveled 60,000 plus miles, 66,000 miles or something like that over the course of the year. It really is incredible. With the addition of Leagues Cup, you had 6 different competitions, or 5 different competitions, excuse me. It really is an incredible success for what they've been able to push through. But that doesn't mean they reached the ultimate success of a trophy. And that's where the disappointment comes in. And that's where my question to Steve Cherundolo comes in of, well, yes, you frame it as a success for the season, and I understand that. But what is the reason for falling in those 3 finals? And his response, as you said, was there is no common thread, right? They're different games. Every game has a different story. And the story in the MLS Cup was simply that the first half was not a very good first half from LAFC. And it's easy to say that. It's easy to say they're different, but I think it's not necessarily the case, because if you are losing consistently in finals and if you're not showing up consistently in finals, I think maybe the Campeones Cup, they showed up in a little bit more, competed a little bit more. They were still outplayed, but at least it was a much closer game than either of the Champions League or MLS Cup. The question has to be asked, why is the team not showing up? If there's a lack of energy in that first half, why is there a lack of energy? If you can't score a goal, in a final, if Denny Boanga is the only guy all year who could score you a goal in a final, why is there nothing else going on? So yes, you can say that they're separate games. My opinion is there's got to be some kind of thread through there. And yeah, I'll disagree with Steve Cherundolo on that. That's fine. But yeah, everybody's got to make up their own opinion. For me, it is definitely something to look at when you lose 3 finals in a single season.
Yeah, I think look to your point, like the expectation was for them to win a trophy, you're right, and I think they didn't get to do that with all the talent and all the amazing success and all of, like I mentioned, all of Denny Bwanga's goals and in the year that Denny Bwanga had, right. So them not winning a trophy is obviously disappointing. The success to me, what I see in LAFC is players like Bwanga, players like Eric Duenas, players like Nathan Ordaz, players that you didn't see, and those players that are coming in the academy, getting Maxime Crepeau back, right? Those I see the success. The fans traveling, right? That's a success. Success. But they also reaching these finals is a success. But I feel like no one's gonna remember this how impressive this season was and how difficult it was for LAFC to reach and play in all these competitions, because you only get remembered by the trophies you win. You know, that's where the difficult thing comes in, right? Right? Are they a bad team or this, right? Like that's a whole different thing. But like no one's gonna remember this how great this team was because they weren't able to win a trophy. Maybe other people may disagree on me with that, but no one's gonna really remember this team because they didn't win a trophy. Maybe the players will and all that, right? But no one's gonna remember how great this team was because they weren't able to get over the hill and win a trophy this season. Yes, they finished second and all that, but you also lose out on Campeones Cup next year, right? You don't have the opportunity to play in those competitions next year. You know, you don't have you're going to play in Leagues Cup and all that, but like Campeones Cup is the biggest tournament next year.
Champions Cup,
Champions Cup, excuse me, Champions Cup. And those are the ones that Champions Cup is the one everybody wants to play, and it's unfortunate that you don't get to play in those. They've had success, but I think the biggest disappointment is not being able to lift the cup, because some teams only have one opportunity, and LAFC had 3 different opportunities to lift one. And like I said this earlier, I just felt that they were battle tested, at least for the MLS Cup, to potentially win that. And obviously, look, everybody's going to have their own opinion. We need to talk about we need to talk about it. And I feel like obviously share what we see it, because it's also been impressive what LAFC's been able to do in these first 6 years, right? Because especially in this era of MLS, and this era of how they've been doing it, this is only Steve Cherundolo's second year with the club, and they've played on all these different competitions. And look, and I know it wasn't easy for Cherundolo, and I know there's been questions and doubts about Cherundolo. And I know people, a lot of fans maybe not in him, maybe not as supportive because he wasn't able to win a trophy this year. But I also look at the fact that, like, I see how LAFC operates and how they run as a club. Him and John Thornton are saying the same thing even after the game, right? 2 different people they had the very similar tone, and I mentioned this to you, and they have the same vision, and those guys are neck and neck with how they see the game and how they see LAFC play. So I don't see Cherundolo leaving anytime soon. No shirty. He, outside of missing on the trophies this year, he's done a solid job. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where the disappointment is not being able to lift at least one major trophy this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, losing those trophies can be a slight on Cherundolo, but it doesn't negate the success that he's had, right? And I think that is the point that they're trying to lay onto the entire season. And I think John Thornton, as you say, put it perfectly, right? And he said that the 27 other teams in MLS all wanted to be in this final. So to say that it's a failure to lose it is just inaccurate, and it's disrespectful to the other 27 teams. And I completely agree with that perspective. And that's why I would, again, not categorize it as a failure, but a successful season that is also very disappointing, right? And that is kind of where I draw the line. It is disappointing to lose those finals, but it is a success for the ability to reach those finals, right? The first team to reach 2 CONCACAF Champions League finals in 5 years, first MLS team to do it at all. So it's really difficult to do the things that LAFC have done to succeed in these type of ways. And you remember when LAFC was in that CONCACAF Champions League final, when they booked their trip there, they were top of the Western Conference, right? They were still doing it in MLS, which had never been seen before. It was unprecedented. And people were talking about, is this the best MLS team ever, right? Had they won that Champions League final, they would have been considered the best MLS team ever. And so it's a disappointment to not reach that threshold, to not get through the light that is right there. It's the trophy that you can get. It's the records. It's the plaudits that you can grab. They're all right there. And so it's disappointing that LAFC didn't get there, but it doesn't mean that it's a failure to not be the best team ever, right? It just means that you didn't quite reach what you wanted, but it's still successful because you're doing better than 27 out of the other, 29 teams.
Yeah. No, well, yeah. Look, it's tough. Obviously, it's a tough, question, but I think it was a very important conversation we had to have. Like the next one, obviously, let's finish off with this. Carlos Vela's future with the club. Obviously, is very unknown. We saw the photo. We got to talk to him. Well, we got to hear him out. We didn't get to ask him a question, but we got to hear him out. Obviously, there when he was leaving the stadium, leaving the locker room. Excuse me. I know Carlos Vela is going to want DP type of money, and he should feel that way. There's no other way. To me, it's very tough for him to retire or go play in Mexico, or I don't even see Europe. I just feel like his family's been here. Well, his family's been here for 6+ years or whatever. He has kids now. I feel like you feel comfortable. I just don't see any other team outside of LAFC. If he's willing to take less money, I don't know how much less he's willing to take. That's the biggest thing, because that's the obvious right there. If he's willing to take less money, then he stays. But I don't know if he's going to take less money than the DP type money. And I don't think he should take anything less than the DP type money. Also, on the other hand, if you're LAFC, his production, his goals has come down, right, since that 2019 season. And you could potentially get someone else younger and maybe not have the impact as a leader, but you can probably get some of that production very similar in a player that's a lot younger. Because Vela's 34 years old, right? He's not getting any younger. He wasn't able to score in any of the finals, and when the team needed Vela to score a goal, it wasn't Vela this year. It was Bouanga, right? And he was more of a facilitator this season that's expected, and he took on that role. So it's a very difficult thing. For Vela, I don't know how he does not return to LAFC. I don't know how he and LAFC don't find a way for him to come back at least for one more year. The question is the money. That's the biggest question. Does he take less money? Is he willing to take less money? If he's willing to take less money, then he comes back to LAFC. If you're LAFC and John Thornton, can you convince him to take less money? Can you convince him to do that? Because I don't think this is the way Carlos Vela wanted to go out. If they won the trophy, if they win MLS Cup, forget CCL, forget Campeones Cup, him and Giorgio Chiellini could have walked away in the sunset and winning back-to-back champions, MLS. You're talking about Carlos Vela potentially being, if not one of the best MLS player and what he's done, especially in this era, right? At least he's in the conversation. But obviously not winning that second one, he's up there, top 3, top 5, whatever. But I think if he would have won it, he would have walked away in the sunset. Being there, he brought 2 big major trophies to LAFC, brought all these competitions and all these different things. You talk about when the statue's getting built, which I think will still happen. But yeah, I think that we'll see what happens. But I just don't see we've seen the end of Carlos Vela. That's my hunch. Just seeing him walk away with that much pain and having that conversation, and that it's not. I don't think it's supposed to end like this for Carlos Vela with LAFC.
Yeah, I think that we all would have liked the storyline of Vela walking away into the sunset with back-to-back championships. But I think it's a difficult situation because, as you say, it's going to come down to money. I think it probably comes down to that DP spot. Vela would want it, and it's going to be up to him whether he would be willing to take a TAM contract. That is up to him. But when it comes to the club's perspective, I think it's very clear at this point that he's not worth a DP contract. He simply isn't. He hasn't scored, if I'm correct, in the past 16 games for LAFC. I mean, think about that, really. He's scored 2 playoff goals in 6 years for the club. He has done some incredible, incredible things, but he's not anymore worth a designated player spot. And so you cannot give that to him. And that, to me, is the tough decisions that a club and a general manager have to make. It's everybody wants Carlos Vela back from a sentimental perspective, but from a playing on the pitch perspective, that is how decisions are made, and that is the decision that John Thorrington and the front office is going to have to make. That no, Carlos Vela isn't a DP player anymore, even if he's the most sentimental player in LAFC history, even if he is LAFC. That doesn't mean that you can just pay him money that he doesn't deserve. And that's unfortunate, I think, because Vela told me, a month or two ago that he is going to play another year. So he's not retiring. If that is with another team, then that's going to hurt LAFC, especially should it be an MLS, which I think is probably less likely. But yeah, it's going to feel weird, I think, to see Vela on another team should he move. But I think that's probably the best move for LAFC at this point, because I don't think Vela will accept anything less than a DP contract, because he can go to Mexico and get paid more, right? He can do that. And so I think it will be up to him and his family and his wife what is the best decision for them, for their life going forward, because it probably is just one more year for Carlos Vela. And where should that be? Is it worth just staying in LA and taking a pay cut? Or is it worth, well, maybe I need to go to Mexico, maybe I need to go to somewhere else and get paid the money that I can, because the LAFC just can't pay him and shouldn't pay him as much as other teams might be able to.
Yeah, he's worth more for someone else outside of LAFC. He will get the bag. He will get a bigger bag outside of LAFC. But that's what it comes down to. Like, do you want? I know this is a crazy thing. Hercules Gomez was talking about him potentially going to LA Galaxy, which is out there. Well, look, if it was anybody else saying this, but look, it's Herc.
Because
I don't
he's
know
a Galaxy. It's Galaxy player.
Yeah, he's a Galaxy player, and obviously Will Kuntz knows Carlos Vela, so he's making that connection. But I just feel like, as a legacy standpoint, like Carlos Vela would ruin his legacy with what he's done, and I just don't see that. I personally don't see Carlos Vela.
I don't think either fan base would want that, Galaxy or LAFC. I don't think anybody would be.
It would be the craziest. It would be craziest. Would like if Galaxy were to offer a bag, then I guess there's some consideration. But I think if he's not worth I think like somewhere like Nashville or like something like an off team can offer him a way bigger bag. But
Nashville
I just don't.
Disrespect is crazy.
Oh, my bad. Well, you know what I mean. Orlando City, I'm naming a random team and not in LA or not one of the big markets. Can offer him, a bag. Then it makes okay. He went there, but it's very tough for me to see him, unless it's an insane option. But like, he can definitely get a bigger bag outside of LAFC, unless he wants to stay.
Yeah, I don't give any legitimacy to that. Herc playing game. Sorry, Herc, but I don't think it's legitimate in any way.
Yeah, look, you say maybe he's just stirring the pot, but I just saw that.
Interactions are always good, man.
I saw that on Twitter and I was like, damn, Herc, what are you trying to do? But look, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But this is one thing I want to say. When Carlos Vela first joined LAFC, I was like, no way he's coming to LA. No way he's coming to MLS. Because at that time he was one of the most talented players playing on the Mexican national team. Obviously, a big supporter of the Mexican national team. And I was just like, I wanted him to stay in Europe for a couple more years. Then he came, and then I got to see him in person, and I got to see his just raw talent. I remember one of the first practices that I got to see Carlos Vela just like dribble the ball, and how the ball just like stuck. Like it was essentially like glued to his left foot, and what he would just do, and just seeing his talent up close was like one of the most unique memories that I had from LAFC. Just when I first saw Carlos Vela actually play in practice, and just that 2019 season. Look, if this is which I don't feel if this is his last year or last season with LAFC. It was also an incredible but humbling experience to be able to watch, talk with Carlos Vela, get to see him. Also see him, like, his interactions with the media grew. They stopped and they grew again. I feel like this season is probably one of the most times this year and last year were the most times he's talked to the media. He's been very open to talking to the media. Previous years he wasn't as much, and I think it's been awesome. If this is his final season, it's been an awesome experience to cover Carlos Vela.
Absolutely. And breaking news while we are on this podcast. LAFC has finally announced their roster decisions. I said earlier in the podcast that I'm surprised they haven't been released. They were released about a half an hour ago. I will read them out to you.
Let's read them out
to you now. Contract options that have been exercised on defender Jesus Murillo, midfielder Ilie Sanchez, and Eric Dueñas, as well as goalkeeper Abraham Romero. The club declined contract options, on Christian Torres, Danny Crisostomo, Julian Gaines, Tony Leone, Mohamed Traore, Daniel Maldonado, Diego Rosales, and John McCarthy, as well as Eldin Jakupovic. Jakupovic, Maldonado, and Crisostomo are all eligible for the MLS re-entry draft process. McCarthy will be a free agent. The club says they are in talks with McCarthy, Maldonado, Gaines, Leone, and Rosales, as well as free agents Carlos Vela, Diego Palacios, Kellen Acosta, and Maxime Crepeau to potentially return to the club if contracts can be made there, which means that there are currently 18 players on the 2024 roster for LAFC under contract. Those, as I said, all that makes sense. Murillo, we expected. Ilie Sanchez, as I said earlier, had that option in his contract, or triggered option, due to minutes and games played. Eric Dueñas, you would expect. Abraham Romero, another young one. So Daniel Maldonado, probably the standout in terms of the declined options, as well as John McCarthy. So a couple of players who played parts in the MLS season, particularly John McCarthy, but maybe backup level players in this squad now were declined options. So maybe they'll look for a cheaper contract for those players or just let them move on. But finally, those roster decisions are out. So there they are for all of you. Breaking news right on this podcast.
Oh, there we go. At least we got it in. I would have been upset if we would have ended the pod.
I got you, Gio, don't worry. I got you.
I just saw the email, and I just saw LAFC obviously post about it on social media. But yeah, well, I mean, there you have it, guys. Obviously, they're in talks with Carlos Vela. Obviously, wanting to bring back. So it doesn't look like that it will be its final season. Anything you'd like to add before we let you go, brother?
I think that just thank you for everybody who's tuned into our coverage over this season. I think that we try and bring the best coverage that we can to you, but it only matters if people tune in and people support us. So anybody who's listening to this right now made it all the way to the end of the podcast. You are the people that we do this for, and we really appreciate you for continuing to support our work.
Yeah, no, and on top of that too, I got to meet a lot of like supporters as like they listen to the show. They're like, "Hey, I listened to you on my way." One guy was telling me he works in construction. He's like, on my way from my home to the job site and all this, and it's just like, obviously we get to see the number of downloads, but we never get to put a face to a download and everything. So anytime we've gone to a game or obviously this final and interact with people, anybody that's came up to us and talked to us, it's very humbling. It's really cool because obviously we just don't know. We put in the week in, week out to obviously do the show, and hear you guys come up and letting us know that you guys listen to shows is very humbling. It's very rewarding as well because we don't know, and that's what I mentioned to Justin over the MLS Cup final, that it was like, man, it's cool to, obviously see people that listen to the show because we don't know who listens to the show unless you guys comment or DM us or whatever. But yeah, no, it was a cool experience. Shout out to you, Justin. Obviously, look, brother, it's been a long season, but you've been putting in the work since last season here, really taking it serious, obviously being on the pod. And, your coverage has been amazing. Having you on the pod, you've been so knowledgeable just with everything's been going on. It made it easier for me, bro, to just do the pod, because I don't got to do everything. I can kind of like low-key kind of depend on you on certain things that I don't, obviously I'm not going to know everything, but it's been very cool to have you on the pod these last couple of seasons.
Appreciate that, Gio. Yeah, it's been a great time. I think that this collaboration between our companies, Upper 90 and LA Soccer Hub, is only going up and forward. So yeah, as Gio says, when you guys come up to us and say hi, it really is fantastic to meet all the people that listen to us and that love our coverage, because we, again, do it for you. So yeah, if you ever see us at a game, please come say hi.
Definitely. Yeah. With that said, that wraps up the 2023 season. Guys, this will be our last pod of the year unless something crazy happens. But I need a break. I think Justin needs a break. So for right now, this will be the last pod of the season. Look, the MLS season is just around the corner. There's so many things that's going to happen, with preseason and all that. But we won't be off for too long. And if anything, just follow us on either follow Justin on Upper 90 or check out LA Soccer Hub. Definitely be posting there. But this is the final part of the year. Appreciate you guys listening. For Justin, this is Gio.